Now on to our big question, and this one's for James. I know that you are a big believer that it isn't just about improving your body, but also improving your mind is an important part of performance. And I know you incorporate this into your own racing and your coaching. So what are some of the best tips that you think can help people improve their mindset and become a more successful athlete?
So I think the first point I wanted to make was just having a balance between having a plan and trusting your instincts. So essentially, when it comes to event planning, it's always important to go in with a plan and an intention about what you want to do and the way you want to execute things in the event. But actually, when you're in that event itself, trusting your instincts a little bit. So an example might be, again, we use Dirty Reef as an example. It's an event that's coming up, which I'm helping a few people prepare for. So for them, it's the plan beforehand in terms of the training and nutrition and that side of things. And again, in the event, it's just being clear on what you want out of it. I say whether you're kind of looking to race at the front or you're just looking to work to a time, kind of having a clear process of, okay, here's my pacing strategy for the event. And okay, if this, like preparing for different eventualities, whether that's punctures or running out of energy or whatever it is, like have a solution for that and kind of think through that beforehand. But equally on the event day itself, not overthinking things. So just kind of going, I've done all I can, because the temptation beforehand is to kind of, you then start thinking through all the different scenarios of what could happen, or what about this, what about that, where in fact, as long as you've done the preparation beforehand, you've prepared as well as you can based on the knowledge you've got at the time. You just need to accept that. And during the event, just engage in the event and enjoy the event itself. Mm-hmm. You can be a lot more calm, a lot more relaxed, and you can make a lot better decisions through the event because of that. Where in fact, I say the alternative to that is one where you're kind of thinking through things, you're worried about all of these details that could happen further down the line. And in fact, it's kind of, ultimately what we're talking about here is optimizing performance in a cycling event, but that could translate into anything. It's kind of even using this podcast as an example. It's ultimately it's a conversation with some friends, but then there's all these other, there's still needs to be there's an objective for the conversation. We're trying to talk about certain topics, and so in this case it's okay, there's a prior plan of okay, we're going to perhaps talk about these details, but it's not necessarily a script. It's not a minute by minute or word by word thing of okay, we're going to talk through all of these steps. And
it's fluid, isn't it?
Exactly.
And the same comes to racing. Like stuff happens that can't be accounted for, or it can be accounted for, but it might change how things happen.
Mm-hmm. And you need to be just prepared to react to that rather than worrying about all the ifs. Mm-hmm. Just accept that. Be content that you've done enough going into it. And then equally, just in terms of I think people can end up in a place where they fear a negative outcome from it.
Yeah.
So it's like if you, again, okay, we're using a race, for example. Obviously, the outcome you want, invariably, if you're racing, you want to win. So if you get the win, then great, fantastic. You're more confident after, you're trusting in the process. Most of the time in cycling, particularly just because of the amount of competitors, the amount of things, the variables, all the rest of it, a lot of the time you don't win. And in which case, you need to have that relationship where if I don't get that outcome, well, I've got feedback of what I need to work on. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, you don't fear not achieving or not getting the outcome. You're content either way, because you're going to you're either going to have achieved it or you're going to be a better cyclist because of it, because you've learned from that feedback. And invariably, you're going to perform better because of that.
It's almost taking the emotion out of it, isn't it? It's taking you, if what you're worried about is failing and what that says about you as a person, it's almost removing that part of it, isn't it? Mm-hmm. It's going, this is the prep I've done, this is what's going to happen, and either I achieve a goal or I learn these things and then we move on. It's like a science experiment ultimately.
100%. And like you said there, just in terms of that, separation from the performance itself. So again, it's when you're going in as you're in that moment, you're a cyclist, you're performing that role on the day. You've got your kit on, you've got your helmet on, you've got the outfit on for you to perform. But it doesn't define you as a person. It doesn't need to become like a real, emotional sort of thing. It's just, okay, I'm performing that role in that moment. And it's the same in any level of performance. It's the same with I think I see it with even people at work sometimes. They'll have they get criticized for the work they've done, for example. And for a lot of people kind of deal with that criticism in a bit of a negative way. They treat it as a personal attack, whereas in fact it's just a feedback on the work they've done. and it's not a reflection on them as a person. It's just, okay, right, in that role, maybe you need to work on this, this, and this, and just have that separation there.
It creates an opportunity to grow.
Mm-hmm.
Jimmy's very good at taking feedback, even in our personal lives.
Yeah. I can imagine he gets a lot of feedback.
What are you trying to say, James? Yeah, no, you are very good. And you will say, have you got any feedback for me? And and you're almost not interested in the good stuff. You want to know, not that it's like bad stuff, but do you know what I mean? You definitely actively look.
I think
things
to be fair, I think what you're saying there, just in terms of looking at the bad stuff, like there's that balance as well to have with it when it comes to analysis, because invariably when I have a lot of conversations with people after an event, they can tell me a long list of things that didn't go well, but it's really important. One of my things I try and emphasize as a coach is what went right. You know, there'd have been loads of parts of that performance that have gone right, and I say particularly in cycling where there's so many variables, you need to kind of emphasize, okay, we've had this plan beforehand. The nutrition strategy was great. I felt I had energy throughout. Tactically, I was aware, but then there was one detail I got wrong. I punctured. So maybe that, okay, you've done all of these steps right. You've made the breakaway. You've got so many different details right, but then you punched at the wrong time. Or as I say, if you're going for a certain time in an event, a time trial, or Dirty Revo, I want to go sub 5 hours over this distance. It's like, okay, I got all of these steps right, but I didn't achieve my goal. I can improve in this way. It's not just a negative, like drilling yourself into the ground and that, because ultimately as well, it's going to help you to improve, but also it's going to be a far more enjoyable process. And enjoyment and fun and all those, that's what gives you longevity, and then longevity is what enables you to actually find your true potential with whatever you're trying to pursue essentially.
Can I ask you a potentially controversial question?
Absolutely.
Do you think that normal people, and I don't consider you to be a normal people because you race at a very, very high level, do you think normal people should care about race nutrition or their weight when they go into an event if they're just doing a random event because they want to do it and they want to do all right at it?
I think it's about caring about it for the right reasons. I think I want them to care in terms of their energy levels, how they're feeling on the bike. I'd want them to be fueling well for training sessions. And I think if you get those basics in place in terms of having the right things for recovery, the right things for fueling, most of the time your weight invariably just kind of starts to drop down anyway. I think, I mean, there's a balance. I think it depends on that person's personality as well. So if they're kind of super obsessive and it could develop into something that would be potentially unproductive, then I'd be cautious about recommending what they do. Where if I feel like I can speak to them and kind of give them some basic tips in terms of how to optimize things, with the caveat that you don't need to obsess. It's not about, it kind of comes back to that point about power, it not being about an exact...
weighing every single thing.
Exactly. Yeah. That is not sustainable, ultimately. The kind of using an app to track how many grams of X you're having and weighing, like scanning barcodes for everything, that's not sustainable practice. Where in fact, if you have like an approach of, I mean, say for example, at the minute, there's actually, I guess it's kind of relevant. There's a guy I was talking to, he's just been away and raced and was kind of had a few concerns about not concerns, he wants to lose a bit of weight. And for him, it's like, okay, right, we'll concentrate on just basic things. Okay, right, a regular source of protein at various different points during the day. Think about carbohydrate relating to the sessions you're completing. And I say a lot of time I'll share podcasts. In fact, there's your mate, Will Gerling.
Yeah.
He did a really good podcast I listened to. And to be honest with you, I share that information with people and kind of let them interpret it, have a conversation around that. And I say it's just, thinking about it, but in not becoming obsessive.
I think I've got a vibe from this entire conversation. I think what I'm taking from it is that you are ultimately saying, do most things at like 80% and you're going to do well. You don't actually need to be like perfect at absolutely everything. Nutrition doesn't need to be 100% perfect. You don't need to train 100% perfectly all of the time. Everything has to have like a buffer of flexibility. And if you do all of the things pretty good, you're going to be better for it.
Yeah, and it comes down to that point of it being more sustainable, because if you're looking to improve longer term, like if you truly want to find out about how far you can progress, you need to be going at it for ages. Essentially, it's not just 1 year crash and burn. Right, I've achieved. It's not that you can't achieve things doing like that. That's not kind of what I'm saying. It's like there will be several high-profile sportsmen will have that mentality where it's like, right, we're all in, absolute obsession. I don't necessarily think that's even the optimal strategy for them, because there's so many examples of complete burnout within sport. And yeah, like, I mean, there's a whole list of absolute high performers. So like Adam Peaty, for example, in the swimming world, Ronnie O'Sullivan in the snooker world, Johnny Wilkinson in the rugby world. These are all people who are like the pinnacle. They've achieved the pinnacle in each of their areas, and equally they've had depression. And it's like, I think the two are definitely related in terms of how they've pursued things, and just that absolute obsession and it defining them during different periods of their career. Where, in fact, both I've listened. I mean, yeah, I don't know if we can promote other people's podcasts on here.
You can do whatever you want.
I'd strongly recommend if there's anything I've kind of brought up today that is interesting, or you're kind of curious around that kind of mental approach. Johnny Wilkinson's got his own podcast, which in fact is releasing another series this week, which is kind of good timing. But he talks a lot about this, and in fact how he was achieving a lot during different periods of his career, but mentally he was just all over the place in a really unhealthy place. And essentially he talks a lot about how the journey of how he's kind of evolved from that point. And it's the same with Ronnie O'Sullivan. I think I spoke to you about this. He's released a documentary on Prime, I think it is. And it's talking about his this kind of behind the scenes access during his win at essentially the World Championships. And they're kind of talking through his processes there. And there's a conversation with a guy, Steve Peters, who's kind of pretty big name in the sports psychology world. And I think what he said to him, it was like when they first started working together, the point he made to Steve Peters, it was like, okay, what do you want out of this? He's like, I just want to enjoy playing snooker again. And he'd got to that point in his career where it just becomes so unenjoyable. And they both those two people, Wilkinson and O'Sullivan, they both referenced this mindset of pursuing perfection, where in fact they both had incredible ability anyway, amazing instincts. And in fact, what they needed to do was just trust their instincts. And they kind of, I think the way I've heard it worded is like when it comes to kind of like mastery, because you could definitely both consider them to be masters of their respective disciplines.
Absolutely.
They describe it as like learning to be a kid again. Because when you're a kid, you're free. You're not worried about all of the outcomes from it. You're not worried about achievement. You're not worried. You don't want anything else out of it. You're just free in what you're doing.
It's pure enjoyment, isn't it?
Exactly. And these are people at the absolute pinnacle saying that.
Yeah.
So,
and you could argue that, especially in cycling, with all of the numbers and data, it's really counterproductive to that. I imagine there's a lot less data and number involved in snooker, for example.
100%.
But in cycling, you almost have to be aware of how the data can be unproductive as well as productive.
Exactly. That's the real challenge within the cycling world, because as I say, it's the message that's being promoted, or the popular message that is being promoted like through the media and everything else, is saying when a race finishes, there's always like, oh, he's done this many watts for this duration, he's done that. It all has to be quantifiable. Yeah. And there have to be that.
But you're not necessarily talking about the things you can't quantify.
Exactly.
That person has done in their preparation.
Exactly. But in fact, when I'm a big fan of just kind of listening. I just find it I love sport in general. I always listen to kind of, okay, I watch the game, but I'm almost as interested in what people have to say after, the performers themselves, but the coaches. And to be fair, sometimes particularly in the football world, it's like some generic, here's the line we're going with and all the rest of it. But equally, a lot of time you can get really good insight into that sports psychology side of things. There's actually, I guess it's kind of relevant given that the race just finished on Friday, Mathieu van der Poel won E3 Harelbeke, which is kind of like a big race in the build up to, well, it's a big race in its own right, but it's also one kind of in the run up to things. And Fabian Cancellara released an article talking through his performance during that, and there wasn't one reference to anything data related. It was more around how Mathieu had a real clear plan in what he's trying to execute, and he was talking more about that. He was talking about the momentum he now has going into the bigger races that are to come, and the effect of Wout van Aert slipping off in the class. How does that affect his mentality? He was talking about Van Aert's mentality going into Flanders, being a Belgian, being a favourite. What does that do? And again, this is a guy who has been prolific in that level, and he's talking about all of these different factors and how challenging it is to manage. And I say the more you kind of tune into that, the more you read about it.
Yeah.
And I say I think.
So if I can round up your last tip there, I guess it's not necessarily, there's an abundance of information online, isn't there? And it's really easy to click on the headlines that are like, the top tips and hacks for this and that and the other, but almost it's trying to delve into the unquantifiable stuff, the qualitative stuff rather than the quantitative
100%.
stuff of what makes very successful people successful.
And ultimately, that's the thing. The thing there is, they're all things that you can do.
Yeah.
That they're within your power. You can't necessarily you don't necessarily have the physical capabilities to do what these guys can do on the bike. Genetically, most people aren't there, but equally, you can embrace productive parts of their mindset and try and improve your performance in that way. I say that's something you're very much, you are in control of that. And I think it's almost like an area where it's like there is endless potential for you to build and grow with when it comes to mindset. And I say I think you need to be kind of free and open to ideas around that. And the more free you are, I think the people I've worked with that have progressed the most are the ones that a little less stuck in their ways. They haven't got this clear, essentially they haven't got a super clear idea of, this is how I've done it, this is how it needs to be, and they're just a bit more free, a bit more willing to kind of embrace new ideas.
100%.